Abu-rahma.
Thank you.
How do you find this conference? Some experiences of yours.
I found the conference to be very interesting. There's many different viewpoints being presented, and that's very nice. What's most interesting is that people are coming from so many different perspectives, but saying similar things. You see a commonality between the themes people are presenting. We're all sort of recognizing a system, a global system, be it economic or whatever, is broken somehow. And the solutions people are presenting, coming from a spirituality background, religious background, they're remarkably similar. And I think that's what's so nice about these kinds of conferences. And it's been a pleasure to be here, to see and hear all these wonderful things.
You strive to come here in search of getting the meaning of spiritualism, because it's a theme of the conference is spiritualism, is paradigm for surmounting management global crisis. Okay, surmounting global management crisis. In the entire event, it's the second day. How do you find spirituality? What do you mean by the spirituality?
This is an interesting question. I've actually been giving it a lot of thought since yesterday, because we've heard from many different speakers, and as you said, the theme is spirituality. So many people are discussing what does spirituality mean. And I can tell you as a Muslim, and I wasn't always a Muslim, I came to Islam, and alhamdulillah. And so when I think about spirituality, for me, they're one and the same. In Islam, was it today or yesterday, I heard a speaker say about Hindu. He said Hindu is not necessarily religion, it's a way of life. And that's resonated with me because Islam is not a religion. And if we call it a religion, people tend to put it in a box, particularly in the West. So when I speak to Western colleagues, I have to explain it's more than a religion, it's a way of life. What that means is it penetrates all of these things. So when people talk about spirituality versus religion, they tend to separate them into two. I think as a Muslim in Islam, we have all of this in one. You have your spirituality, your guide for right and wrong, the way you ought to do things, the way to interact with people, the way you eat your food, the way we worship God, subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of these things, they're all in Islam. So for me, as a Muslim, spirituality and religion are one and the same.
How do you define spirituality?
How do I define spirituality? I think spirituality is that part of religion, part of my faith, that helps me better understand who I am through understanding God. And the better we can understand God, the better we understand our parts in the grand scheme of the world, in God's plan. Spirituality is the inquiry, the quest of discovering what that is. But for me as a Muslim, I can't do that without understanding my Creator. So this is why they're connected for me. Does that make sense?
When we talk about globalization, then religious activism, especially activism when we are focusing, you understand how the religion is being used. Then where do you find spiritualism? Globalization and religious activism. These two words have become, yes, religious activism. How do you define spiritualism in between these two words? It is just a separate thing, or spiritualism is a better word when you talk about globalization and religious activism?
Well, I think fundamentally it depends on who they are. There's nothing wrong with calling oneself spiritual, particularly if you don't feel connected to one interpretation of the Creator. So if you identify as spiritual, certainly there's nothing wrong with that. It's not how I identify myself, that's all. When it comes to religious activism, I think you've seen more of this, as I said, because people are reacting to a frustration they feel globally about the state of things. You see it through the protests that we've seen over the past year in the Arab world. You've seen it through the protests we've seen over the past year in the United States, the current protests in Greece. People have a frustration they feel. So religious activism perhaps comes out of that because people are looking for an answer, and perhaps they think they have found it. But where does spirituality come into that? I think spirituality is a component, depending on how one identifies oneself.
So in the globalization, when the globalization word was started and it became implemented in the various parts of the world, you can consider it's a reason for the crisis which has come up?
Perhaps. I think through globalization many good things have come about. Key among them is a mutual understanding about the world, about things. Through globalization we are more connected, more than ever. I think through history today we are more connected. We have a great opportunity to learn about other people, to learn about their cultures. And this learning is very important because as we learn, we find common ground. Common ground allows us to build bridges. The more bridges we build, the more solid they are, the harder it is to burn them. So globalization has been very good in that regard. Where globalization has been perhaps a detriment maybe to societies and cultures is the exploitation part that has come with it. Because people are going to look, as we said, particularly through economics and corporations, a cheaper way of manufacturing, a cheaper way of doing this, cutting costs. And sometimes when that happens, the cost is a burden somewhere. Maybe you're not paying the cost, maybe I'm not paying the cost, but perhaps these people who aren't being paid fairly, perhaps they're bearing the cost.
Somewhere a human being is missing in the definition of globalization.
Perfect, yes.
What's your opinion?
I think that's very true. I think perhaps in our quest to get things very cheaply, and I think consumerism is a big part of this, I think in our quest to do that, we've forgotten about other people. It's more difficult for people to become or to feel empathy. And empathy is, I think, a uniquely human trait. We feel empathy. We can understand or do our best to understand what someone else is going through. And through globalization, through immediate satisfaction, we get everything whenever we want it. These kinds of things have made empathy more difficult because it's put a barrier in between us and someone else. So globalization can be used for good because that barrier can be minimized and taken away, or it can be greater because the needs that we have will become greater. They're not needs actually, they're desires, they're wants. The wants we have grown, and so our desire to be immediately satisfied has also grown.
So when we talk about inner satisfaction and the product satisfaction, globalization has given us product satisfaction, and what about inner satisfaction? This is something you can find in spiritualism?
Inner satisfaction, I think, is also uniquely human. We need to feel some kind of happiness within ourselves before we are happy with other people. I've heard many speakers today and yesterday discuss this concept of, if I get this, then I'll be happy. If only I do this, then I'll be happy. If. What that does is make it difficult for us to live now because we're constantly planning for tomorrow. And when we get to tomorrow, we haven't lived in our past. So this cycle of life makes finding inner tranquility, inner peace difficult. Does globalization play a key role in that? Maybe. I think what globalization has done was market to people and tell people this is what you need to make you happy. So perhaps what would have made us happy, perhaps what we could have recognized generations ago, is now difficult for us to see. Because we think, oh, if I get that iPhone 4S, I'm going to be thrilled. Instead of thinking, if I do this for somebody else, I'll be happy. If I do this for myself, I'll be happy. It's these material things that somehow will bring us happiness.
You are doing work on Islam and education. Do you think education can provide a better solution? If education system can be enhanced or something of some input like spiritualism can be added in education, it will definitely help?
Well, my personal view is that education is actually the only solution. I think if we have policies from the government that are come down, it's not going to work. Because people will still operate the way that they've been operating, regardless of any law that's been passed. Furthermore, passing a law now means you have to implement it and you have to enforce it. And that's a whole other thing you have to do. If we can educate people to act morally in a conscious way, then the need for this law, that law, the ability to enforce a law has been minimized, makes it easier. What I am researching now is on perhaps an Islamic model of education. Let me explain that. I don't mean education about Islam. We have a lot of people doing that, and I don't see any further need to help in that regard. My research is perhaps about mode of education, the way we educate people, the curriculum that we educate people. And I also want to say, when I talk about education in Islam, it's no superiority there. It's not because Islam is a superior model to others. It's not that. I'm a Muslim. This is where I get my spirituality, my guidance. And I think certainly, at least for other Muslims, they would feel the same. So when we are educating people, it's very important to have this notion of ethics, perhaps, put across the curriculum. You can't have a course on ethics. I heard an earlier speaker say you can't put it in the syllabus, and he's right. You can't have one course in ethics, one course in morality, and think, okay, I've done my job as a teacher. Education, particularly moral education, righteous education, has to be across the curriculum. You have to have it in English, you have to have it in math, you have to have it in Arabic and in science and in all these things. And I agree with many speakers that there's no debate there, that these things can coexist very peacefully, very complementary. They help each other, actually, because they help give understanding of why we do things. So do I think education can offer a solution? Yes, I think it can offer a very powerful solution. If, as a people, as a society, as a human race, we decide that these need to be our priorities and we're going to start working toward doing this. And on a practical level, certainly, if students are in school and the teachers they have, all the teachers they have, the parents they have, the people who are around them in their community are telling them this is the correct way to be and here's why, I think you will see a shift in the values people have.
In Asian region, it has been seen largely that women play a very important role in inculcating values and ethics in their kids and children. What's your thinking? They should be educated or they should be developed in a manner that means in education there must be something to be kept so that they can develop their future generation more valued and more ethical.
Well, whoever said development at home is not education. I would argue, in fact, that mothers and fathers, both parents are equally responsible here. Parents are the first teachers. They're the ones who teach children at home. I often tell colleagues, well, when my kids come home, they'll say to me, when my kids come home, they've been in school for 8 hours a day, they need to play. And I will tell them, why weren't they playing at school? Who said school has to be sitting and copying things down in a copybook? Why aren't they having fun? School should be fun. Education should be fun. The more fun it is, the more enjoyable it is for children and people of all ages, the better they will learn, the more receptive they will be. Do women play a primary role in educating values in their children? Absolutely. And I think you'll find this true across everywhere, including the United States where I'm from. You find that a commonality. But I think fathers and dads play a key role, and I think that's often minimized, and I'm not sure why. Dads and fathers, they're educators for their children, just as mothers are. So parents in general, yes, they're teachers, and they're their children's first teachers, and that's a very, very important job.
When we talk about the effort of our institute, School of Management Sciences, this has been the initiative taken by us. How much you are satisfied the initiative which we have taken?
I think I applaud you on the initiative at this school. It's a very big undertaking, and I think sometimes people don't realize how much work goes involved. So I know that clearly you've all here at the school have worked very hard putting this together, and I for one am very appreciative. I think we've all had a really wonderful opportunity to come and share some different perspectives, some different ideas, and most importantly, as we said, find the common ground, to build those really solid bridges that we can now move forward and cross to have greater understanding through among all of us.
In near future, we would like to get some involvement of your university and institute, or even the country, to provide certain better input, so that we can get a better output. Would you be suggesting something to us?
Absolutely. These are the bridges, right? We all need